Hey everyone, this is Adam Hudson here. I just wanted to give a brief update, well, not really update, correction on a couple things I said in this episode as it relates to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and especially with high profile murders like this. Um, there's all kinds of information that gets out and spreads easily on the internet, and then sometimes stuff turns out to be not true. So, um, and it's not always nefarious. Sometimes it's just like, hey, make a mistake. So, um, that's the case here. So I wanted to make two corrections and like one sort of like fleshing out. The first one has to do with the shootings of Minnesota legislators. I believe in the episode that I got the dates mixed up. I was looking at my notes, and so I wanted to make sure I got that clarified right off the bat. So the correct date is June 14th, 2025. And these are two Minnesota state lawmakers who were shot. The first was Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. John Hoffman is a Democrat. He and his wife were shot in their home. Fortunately, they survived. They were hospitalized. So Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman is still alive. Unfortunately, Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman, she was shot and killed along with her husband in their home in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. By the same person, and the police identified 57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter as a suspect, and captured him the day after. So, yeah, the correct date it was June 2025, specifically June 14th, 2025. So just 3 months ago. And yeah, sadly, Minnesota State Representative, Democrat Melissa Hortman, she was assassinated along with her husband. And yeah, in the midst of people talking about Charlie Kirk, it is weird like that sadly hasn't been talked about as much, because I do remember it. I mean, it was just 3 months ago, but even sometimes, like, it's sad that this has become so normalized that sometimes you forget when it happens. But I mean, it's just, yeah, like, anyway. So just want to get that out of the way in terms of the correct date. The second piece of information, Tyler Robinson's father, Matt Robinson, turns out he did not, in fact, work for the sheriff's department. In the episode, I claimed that he did, because that's what was reported and spread out there in the news. Turns out that was incorrect, and the local sheriff department issued a statement saying that apparently there are multiple people with the same name, Matt Robinson, in the area. So seems to be a case of mistaken identity. So there's what it seems to be is that there's another Matt Robinson who used to work with the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Utah. But that Matt Robinson is not the Matt Robinson who is the father of the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk, whose name is Tyler Robinson. So, anyway, yeah, I was like, holy shit, okay. But I've seen that repeated a lot by people, and I don't think it's been said enough that his father did not, in fact, work with the sheriff's department. It was most likely another Matt Robinson, and particularly in a predominantly white state like Utah, I'm sure there are a lot of Matt Robinsons, and something like that seems to be easy to be confused and get a mix-up of. Anyway, last thing I wanted to mention, because I talked to a friend of mine about this, about the Helldivers 2 reference. He gave me some insight on what the game is about, and according to the synopsis on the description of Helldivers 2 on Wikipedia, It says set in the 22nd century, the story follows the Helldivers, a force of shock troops dispatched to combat various threats to humanity and to spread managed democracy. So that's anyway, yeah, 100 years after the humanity sees fascism like travel. Anyway, and so my friend described it the way he described it. He compared it to Starship Troopers, and that like your side is fighting against like fascist and threats to humanity, and you're fighting for democracy. But he was saying that like as you get deeper into the game, it's not quite like that, and you start to question your own side and yada yada yada. And so anyway, and so like it does seem to be that the bullet casings seem to be a reference to that game of Hellfire 2, particularly like the arrow sequence. And anyway, so yeah, that is it. I just wanted to issue those clarifications. And anyway, I hope you enjoy the episode. Peace out. Yo, what's up? This is an emergency podcast episode, Real Sankara Hours, your favorite Pan-African socialist political podcast. Today is September 14th, 2025. Yeah, 3 days after the 9/11 anniversary, but that is not what people are talking about. That's not what's been in the news. It's yeah, so something happened.
Yes, I want to just relate to it as I found out about it because
mm,
I was at work on Wednesday. It was already a pretty stressful day because they were doing a lot. And one of my coworkers like walks in and he's like, "Do you know who Charlie Kirk is?" And I was like, "Oh God, why?" I was like, yes, but I'm not happy about it." He's like, "Apparently got shot." I was like, "What?" And I'm not gonna lie, I did have a big grin on my face for like 5 seconds. Um, I'm only human, but that does not mean I was celebrating it. Okay, do not.
r- yeah. Just before Peter continues, this is Adam Hudson here. Like, yeah, we are. Um, yeah, for the sake of this episode, important disclaimer: uh, Real Sankara Hours is not condoning um the killing of Charlie Kirk. So everything we're saying here is not to condone any form of political violence. We're not condoning particularly political assassination, and we do mean that. We're not just saying that to cover our asses, but like, it is um particularly political assassination of individuals. Um yeah, there are some corrosive effects of that, especially if it gets normalized. So even, even of people that we may not like and whose views we don't like, we're not going to lionize Charlie Kirk on this episode, just a heads up. But nothing that we say on this episode should be construed as us, celebrating or condoning the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. But we also think it's important for people to understand who he is as a figure and also like where he fits in his current political moment, because for better or for worse, he was influential and he did have a huge impact in terms of the MAGA movement. So, which makes sense as to like why this is such major news and why we felt it was important to record this episode. But um, just want to get that out the way because, yeah, people are, getting fired over, how they react. And also, it's not a good idea, in my opinion, in both our opinions. We were talking about it before we recorded. Um, I'm not in favor of people getting fired over what they say about Charlie Kirk, but also at the same time, it's like, uh, after I heard about it, I was like, I want to be careful about what I say in response to this because, especially on your social media platforms, when there's your full name, like tensions are
Yeah,
high.
that part is
Yeah,
just like, don't be
yeah,
stupid,
right,
you
exactly.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
You don't
anyway,
have to get your posts off. Like you can just kind of.
right, yeah, and especially like on a media platform like this, especially like when it's a shooting of this nature or a mass shooting, I'm actually glad that we recorded a couple days after just to so that more facts and information get out. But uh, but yeah. So anyway, continue, Peter. I just want to say that just clear the
Oh
air
yes,
before we
no, it's
continue.
good to get it out of the way now.
Yeah.
Um, so then he's like, "Do you want to see the video?" And in my mind, I was like, "No, I don't." But it's like if he had it right there, and it honestly was pretty disturbing. I don't think ever seen anyone get shot like that with that much blood coming out. And so I understand like, and it was like a pretty crowded event. Um, so I can understand why this is like freaking many people out who don't understand what country they live in, even though they're the ones who claim to love it the most, but refuse to understand just exactly how awash in violence this country is. And then I was pretty shook for a few hours, just thinking about it, especially, not that like we have never had a big enough platform really to draw the ire of anyone on the other side, but it's still like you do think about it as someone who does have a podcast, I guess. But then I was kind of like, you know, then people probably, but then it's just like every other horrific act of violence that happens in this country where people just forget about it in a couple of weeks, once they find the guy, and of course immediately the right was falling all over themselves to blame this on the left and like, oh, the left is the party of murder and all this stuff. And there was a part of me that was like, is it at this point where like, because certainly like the quote unquote online left or the organized left is not capable of doing something like this, which I think both of us had figured out pretty quickly that like unless there's a left that I've never heard of in the United States, no self-branded leftist like really does anything like that. Could not hit that shot, especially. So it. I don't think the left has like gone too far necessarily. I mean, I do think people trying a little too hard to be edgelords, but it is a little bit hard when it is someone who got their start, making memes. Like he's probably the original right wing meme king. Like, you know, I feel like he's been around for over a decade. Like it's crazy. And so I under but it is just like don't be I think there are people who um I guess they haven't done the reading or anything like or just to put it broadly, and they want to have the reaction that is like proves that like I didn't care about him. And I'm not saying you have to, but it's also just like you don't necessarily have to say all that. You don't have to, you know, post the rotten hell part or whatever. I mean, I I will say that I don't think the way his life ended necessarily lines up with what he did in his life, which doesn't mean that I think he did anything good. But I was just very struck that I was like, why would someone like him be a target? I mean, I had basically forgotten about him, you know. He had he was almost like it's almost like being eclipsed by the breakneck rate at right wing media is going into just outright fascism, like and as the details emerge, that may be why he was killed. But he always seemed like, I guess, a little more old school conservative. Like most of the stuff he said really didn't sound anything different from what you would hear on Fox News or right wing talk radio. It's just that he would go to college campuses and say it. But um, you know, it's not like yeah, I just feel like it'll be out of the news cycle and then, we'll just move on and people will forget. That's what I'm hoping at least. That's what I tell myself. But I do feel like that's generally the correct reaction. It's like, this is America. No one remembers. There will be another horrific act of violence. You know, which is also not to ignore, the still ongoing genocide, which is also, which, most, I'd say probably 99.9, if not all, of the people freaking out about Charlie Kirk's death were ignoring it, if not also celebrating the genocide. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the way I heard about it was well, I was just finishing a substitute teaching assignment, and when I was wrapping up because the kids were dismissed, my friend texted me, and it was like, "Whoa, did you hear what happened?" I'm like, and then my other friend texted me, and she was like, "Whoa." I was like, "All right, something's going on." And then I don't know. I think I heard apparently. And then I went to Twitter, and I think it was Twitter or somewhere on social media where it's like, oh, Charlie Kirk got shot. I was like, what? And yeah, I did see the video, and yeah, I had a similar reaction. I was like, oh, like he right when I saw the video, my reaction was, okay, he's not surviving that. Like, there's no way. But the video was disturbing. Like, just to see that much um blood. Um, I don't know. As someone who's covered like Guantanamo and war a lot, and like police brutality, and um I don't want to say I'm completely desensitized to those images, but it's kind of like um and even seeing I mean, probably the worst was seeing my own mother die, like her last breath. So I don't want to say I'm like messed up, uh, because I was still kind of shaken from it, which I felt was a good thing. That like, okay, yeah, this is still it feels in a weird way. I think like if you're shaken by seeing an image, I think it's a good thing because it shows you're still human. Um, like so it's a mix of that, but also feeling like um, I'm mm, like uh no real love for the guy, to be honest. But well, I feel that the image was like, oh, that's it's kind of sad, you know. Um, because on a human level, it's still like, yeah, it's like it's disturbing. I think that kind of image of just seeing any, I would just say seeing any human being lose their life like that, um, is like it's like, oh dang, that's you still feel for them on a human level. That's what I mean. That's what I'm getting at. So yeah, that's kind of my reaction, is that I still feel for him on a human level that um that dang, that's messed up. I mean, I definitely, to be honest, I truly feel for his family, especially his kids, because he does have I believe like a 1 year old and a 2 year old, and as odious as I find it, as odious as I find his views, I genuinely feel sad for those kids. To be honest, it's like, dang, those kids are not gonna have a father, and when they grow up, as 10, 20 years goes by, they're gonna have to see that video of their dad being killed, and then learn, and who knows? Here's the thing, because like, we don't know like how his kids are gonna evolve, right? Because Charlie Kirk, I mean, as we're gonna expand, like he had his far right views. I mean, we have no idea how his kids will evolve politically. Like they could perhaps follow in Kirk's footsteps, or they might go in their own trajectory. They might, who knows, they might grow older and be like, they may feel sad about losing their father, but one possible thing is like they may look at his views and be like, yo, we want nothing. They may want nothing to do with that, because that does happen. Like there's sometimes kids who have like parents who are ultra right wing, and then they grow older and they start questioning what their parents said. So I don't know like how his kids are going to develop politically, but just on a human level, that's where I felt the strongest. To be honest, I really felt for his family, that, and his wife is a widow now, so that's where my heart goes to. I'm like, I genuinely feel bad. Like, dang, his family's going through a lot right now. Like, holy shit. Like, I'm sure his wife, she, I mean, I heard a little bit of what she said, her first reaction to it, but I could tell like she's devastated, and like I said, I really feel for his kids. And I think like, to make sure that I do want to emphasize like him having like his children, just to make sure we all don't lose our collective humanity, because like I said, with the kids, we don't know how like they're going to develop over time. And I just think it's sad that like that those kids are not going to have their father around. And like, like I said, his kids they have the opportunity to politically develop on their own terms, whichever way, with or without their father in the picture. Like, let's say if Charlie Kirk lived a longer life, his kids would still have that chance to evolve on their own terms. Because like I said, like, sometimes kids with really conservative parents, they don't always, especially if like there's more than one kid. You might have one kid who follows in their parents' right-wing footsteps, then you might have another kid who like goes in a completely different direction, right? So yeah, I say like on a human level, I want to emphasize that like, yeah, that was my reaction, was just like, oh, it's really feel for it. I really feel for his kids. Like, holy shit. I truly feel bad that like at some point in their life they might have to see that video of their own father being killed in that nature. So anyway, with that out of the way, maybe we should like transition to like who Charlie Kirk was, because I think now like it's been a couple days since Charlie Kirk died, because he I believe because today's Sunday, he died Wednesday,
September 10th.
Yeah, September 10th, and today is September 14th. So this is we are recording this 4 days after he was assassinated, and so his full name was Charles James Kirk. He was born October 14th, 1993 in Arlington Heights, Illinois. And then he died September 10th, 2025 at the age of 31.
Which is younger than I thought, honestly.
Yeah, which in a way like does, when you put it, like when we look at it that way, right? Like how young he was, is like, that does make it like sad. And I think it's good that we talk about like just some of the humanity of this before we dive into like his actual views, because I do think as a figure I do genuinely think Charlie Kirk has had a very corrosive impact on the body politic in the United States. And I think that even as like people talk about like the nature of his death, we cannot lose sight of that, because the thing I'm seeing, and like we could talk, you and I could talk about this more, Peter, but like what I'm seeing, especially from liberals, is like there's a lot of like revisionism about who he was, and like, because I do think, okay, you can look at the humanity and recognize the damage of political violence and political assassination within the larger body politic and the ramification, and call for some sort of like level-headedness, and like not be too, I guess, like gleeful or anything, right? Even if it's someone that like whose views you find horrible and disgusting, you can call for that just for like overall civility and to like cool the temperature, so that more, because my concern is that this be used as a moment to call for like more political violence, particularly from the right, because I don't like when people talk about political violence, they act like it's a both sides thing. Because here's the thing: the right wing is more armed than the left. The left, the thing with quote unquote political violence on the left, a lot of that on the left is like tough guy talk. A lot of it is like posturing. Like, if we're really thinking about it, like, because Peter and I, we know lefties pretty well. We've been in these spaces for quite some time. And like when lefties talk about like revolution this, revolution that, like armed struggle, like a lot of it is like edgelord cosplaying, because most leftists, like the left wing does not have a gun culture to that extent. Only like a minority do, but like most lefties are not gonna like muster up like the will to like go and shoot somebody. I mean, most leftists can't even go to the fucking gym. Like, if you tell like a lefty like, hey, you should go to the gym, lift some fucking weights, they'll make all some kinds of excuses like, oh, I can't go because so like the left itself largely rejects fitness. So like there really isn't like a culture on the left that like has the capability to enact violence. Most of it's just like posturing. The right wing, on the other hand, there's rhetoric backed up with like a shitload of guns. So I do think like we need to recognize that when it comes to like the amount of guns in this country and the actual gun culture in America, it is predominantly a conservative thing. It's not a left wing thing. So let's get that out of the way. But like, what's kind of annoying me, or what's been annoying me seeing this like after the death of Kirk, is like people making Charlie Kirk to be like this guy who just cared about free speech and debate for like this. He just cares about the free exchange of ideas in the market. Like, no, that wasn't who he was. So like, and speaking truthfully about who Charlie Kirk was is not like, I mean, I don't buy the whole like don't speak ill of the dead thing, because I do think that like even for people that, let's say they're not like a famous person, let's say if like this wasn't a case for me, but like let's say if there's someone, because I know people for whom this is a case, it is like let's say their parent dies and they go to the funeral, but let's say their parent was a piece of shit. Let's say they were abused by their parent, or let's say their parent wasn't there for them. Like, let's say the parent just wasn't a good parent at all. The kind of norm would be like, oh, you can't say that at the funeral. You have to mourn. You have to pay your respects to the dead, and da 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 da. But like, let's say if the parent's kid is like, you know what, they were a piece of shit. They were a bad parent. I think that's okay to say that at a funeral, right? So like on a normal circumstance, like if you had a relative who was like, I don't know, maybe they were violently abusive. Maybe they molested their kids. Maybe they had a secret fucking family that they didn't tell anybody about. Like, I think that's okay to bring up at a funeral. So, in the same way, if there's a famous political figure who had some cultural and political influence, speaking the truth about who they are, I don't think is a bad thing. So I want to get that out the way. But like, wait, Peter, what was your like? What are your before we get in the people who are just like Charlie Kirk was he just cared about
Um,
God and family and free speech
I
and like blah
mean,
blah.
he would. I mean, if you're on the right, it's understandable, especially
Blah.
because he was
Right.
he made himself more explicitly Christian,
Yeah.
compared to like the straight up Nazis who definitely don't care about religion. So that's understandable, though I think it's just pretty silly to put him as some sort of statesman or towering intellect. But I don't look. I'm not on the right, so I don't know. I will say, I think he loomed larger among Gen Z. Um, so I can see why they might think this is a bigger deal, than I would. But I would also say that, yeah, what he did in his life did not promote critical thinking or intellectual debate. Like, what he did were circus acts. Like, he would, say, go book a speaking gig at some university, say some inflammatory shit that would get a lot of people pissed off, and then people would be like, "You suck," and then he would just berate them. Or if he actually like was getting cornered, he would just switch like he didn't debate honestly or in good faith about anything. So it wasn't like, you see like the old videos, even someone like William F. Buckley, um, where like, they come to debate on Cambridge campus, the affairs of the day, and they get, this right-wing intellectual and this left-wing intellectual, and they do have an actual argument about the issue. That's not what Charlie Kirk did. His whole goal was basically trying to goad lefties that were dumb enough to, um, you know, engage with him into making them cry and then post videos about it so that idiots on the right could feel smug about themselves. That was his life's work, basically. I mean, though in the current in Trump 2.0, it does seem that he had sort of started to move beyond that. Like Turning Point became like an actual pack, not just a meme factory, not just a media company. And I think he was probably on his because he was pretty well set up. He went to college and then dropped. He was always active in Republican politics, and then kind of got taken under his wing by Bill Montgomery, a Tea Party person, and they just, on the right, like anytime there's just like a clean cut white boy who, says the right things. I mean, I'm not gonna get too much into how they react to them, but it's a little weird. It's a little extra. Like the amount of old ass men who are like, I loved this man. I loved him so much. He was such a beautiful soul. You're like, okay, I can speculate what goes on in those parties, but um, the point is that they latch on to any kind of young white man who reflects what they want to see. And so his path to the top was pretty well greased, and he was just smart enough not to fuck it up the way like Steven Crowder or someone like Tim Pool, who's just a fundamentally noxious human being. Um, he's able to just like kind of keep it overall in the guardrails. I mean, which what passes for acceptable, what passes for in the guardrails is still pretty deranged these days. But like I said, I never felt like what he was saying was really that much further to the right than the average stuff on Fox News or let's say OANN. It's just that it was a young person saying it, and because of that, I think, especially in like the more, because there's basically a whole right-wing college ecosystem. Um, it's not like all universities are liberal bastions or whatever. Even the ones that are, it's just like two departments in the main point of the university is the real estate development company that hands out degrees. And all the real, like you'll have some lefties in like the English department, but the econ department is still very conservative. Um,
Oh yeah, it was like that,
yeah.
like at Stanford, cause I studied. I have my BA is in international relations, and so, but my concentration was political science and history. So international relations as a department is interdisciplinary. So you could have like one of three concentrations. So there's like a cultural concentration. It's more like kind of cultural studies, anthropology type. Then there's uh the political science history part, which is what I did, and then I did a minor in Arabic in Middle Eastern languages, literatures, cultures. So what I studied was like a mix of political science, history, and Middle East studies. Like that's what I studied in college. And then the other part of IR was more like econ and trade, like like global economics and global trade, and like even so, like as part of the major, as part of the major, like let's say you would have like a specific concentration, there would be like some core classes you still had to take, and so like there were some core econ classes I had to take, and I remember like taking those econ classes, like the econ department, at Stanford, like during that time from like 2006 to 2010, just to give y'all a time frame. So that was like uh late Bush to early Obama years. Um, like yeah, the econ department at Stanford was notoriously pretty right wing, and I think that's the case for most universities. Like if you go to any econ department throughout the country at any university, most of them are going to be like at the very least right of center. Probably not like full blown like MAGA. And I mentioned the time frame of when I went to college because like um conservatism has been like redefined. And that's why I do think like looking at Charlie Kirk and who he was is I do think it's important to understand where we're at because conservatism has been redefined by the Trump movement and Charlie Kirk is part of that. So I think again, since his passing, since his death, it's important to understand Charlie Kirk as a figure and why, like, for better or for worse, he is important. He is definitely an influential figure for sure. Probably not for like good influences, but influential for sure. But yeah, like, yeah, a lot of econ departments are right wing, and I do remember some of my econ classes. The vibe was kind of like right of center a little bit.
I had to take two econ classes, and one of them was like literally taught by George H.W. Bush's economic advisor. Um,
Oh, yeah, there are people like that. I don't.
uh,
Do you remember the name?
but
Wait, do you remember the name? I'm
Michael
curious.
Boskin, I think.
Okay, I didn't have them, but like that,
Uh,
there are people like that. Yeah, there are people
but
like.
just to finish my point, I think what I was getting
So,
to is
yeah,
that
sorry.
um, it seemed like like he was at the White House seemed like pretty regularly, and you
Charlie
kind of
Kirk, right?
yeah, Charlie Kirk.
Yeah,
Sorry. And it seemed like he, was moving into like being an like major figure on the right. I mean, he probably would have gone on to just be someone like James Dobson, as he eventually got older and wouldn't be like the youth guy. I would assume he seemed to get enough good advice to like learn how to actually build something. But, in the grand scheme of American history, I doubt he would have been really much to write about, until now. But but as I said, it does feel very incongruous, what happened to him versus, the role he played. Like, the people who are actual ghouls that have presided over the murder of thousands in this country, those are the people where I feel like, they have a karmic debt that, like, if something like that were to happen to them, it would make a little more sense to me. This doesn't really make sense, but I think that might be part of it. or we can get into some of the speculation around it in a little while. But
Yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, just like how to um continue this, like let's talk about a bit of his bio. Um, yeah, his bio, like Charlie Kirk's biography, and where he fits in terms of like the conservative movement, and then we can kind of then Peter, you can talk about, because you've crossed paths with, like, where Charlie Kirk was born. So like you can, I'd love to get your take on that, and then like so we'll talk about that, and then like uh after we talk about his bio, where he fits in the conservative movement, and I'll also mention like my kind of overall assessment of Kirk. Like once we do with that, then we can like kind of like talk about, yeah, the speculation and the shooter and etc. Which, by the way, as of this recording, there's still more details coming out. So like um so what we say at the time of like this being released, there may be more updates. So I just want to like make sure, um yeah, so we clarify that, because yeah, especially with like the details of the shooter, the motive, like after we stop recording, there might be more details released, but we're just giving like a update in terms of like what we know so far. Um, but anyway, yeah, I'll talk about like Charlie Kirk's biography. And obviously there's a bunch of stuff on Wikipedia, you know, his bio, but there are like, well, actually, like I'll talk about his bio and his views, then I'll give like my overall assessment of him. So like let's like I'll just bring up his views, like the stuff he's actually said, just to get that out the way. Um, like there is a he did, like, you know, the whole Jubilee shit, which I'm so sick of Jubilee. They just like I don't know. The whole format of the Jubilee debate is like, we're gonna have like one peacenik leftist versus 20 fascists, and they're going to debate whether or not child murder of Gazans, of Palestinians, is a good thing. Like it's always structured something stupid like that. But it's obviously like clear rage bait to get clicks. But Charlie Kirk was debating, like, you know, some like young college kids or whatever, and he was opposed to affirmative action. But I think where he went further past like the typical, like, I would say Bush era, George W. Bush era, and previous conservative, like their view on race was largely affirmative action is bad, racism, systemic racism is not an issue, it's black culture that's the problem. He would say that, but I think where Charlie Kirk went further is that, and this is what the clip says, and I'll put it in the show notes. Like he said, black people were better off during slavery and and segregation during the 1940s, and he was also critical of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which I would argue is like one step further than what conservatives before him would say, because a lot of conservatives that came before him, they wouldn't openly question the Civil Rights Act. They wouldn't go that far. They would probably say like, okay, this is good, but they would say affirmative action is bad. Like their whole thing was like, okay, we've given you black people enough. You don't need any more help. Like Martin Luther King was good. We ended segregation. All right, now like stop complaining about race. And any sort of like that was pretty much like that's pretty much was what like the conservative talking point on race, like after the Civil Rights Act. What Charlie Kirk was saying, I would argue, goes even further, because he's saying that the 1964 Civil Rights Act is bad and that black people were basically better off before it, which again is something that like most conservatives before him would say. He also said things like, okay, I'm going to say his quotes on a variety of issues, because again, I think this is important to mention as people remember him. Okay, I'll talk about gender and feminism. He said this of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's engagement. This actually happened, I think, a couple weeks before he was killed. He said, "Reject feminism, submit to your husband, Taylor. You're not in charge." When he was asked
Which
a
is
question on
a
what,
hilarious thing to think about, given those two.
right? Responding to a question about whether he would support his 10-year-old daughter aborting a pregnancy conceived because of rape on a debate, he said, "This is a question about like whether like." Because he has a daughter, but she's not 10 yet. So let's say if his now daughter would be 10 years old, like if she got pregnant as a result of rape, like would he support her getting an abortion? He said the answer is yes. The baby would be delivered. He also said April 1st, 2024, and I highly doubt this quote is an April Fool's joke. He said this on the Charlie Kirk show. He said, "We need to have a Nuremberg-style trial for every gender-affirming clinic doctor. We need it immediately." Hey. This is a quote that's been making the rounds a lot, especially after he got shot. He said, "I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational." He said that April 5th, 2023. Here he is. I'm just going to read more quotes. On immigration, America was at its peak when we halted immigration for 40 years and we dropped our foreign-born percentage to its lowest level ever. We should be unafraid of that. He said, the American Democrat Party hates his country. They want to see it collapse. They love it when America becomes less white. And here we go. Here is where he openly embraces the idea of the Great Replacement theory, conspiracy theory. He said, "The Great Replacement strategy, which is well underway every single day in our southern border, is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different." So, not only did he oppose the Civil Rights Act and basically favored reversing it, he also openly supported the idea of that essentially immigration, interracial marriage, etc., is a strategy to basically replace white people. So he endorses that conspiracy. He endorsed that conspiracy theory. On religion, there is no separation of church and state. It's a fabrication. It's a fiction. It's not in the Constitution. It's made up by secular humanists. Well, the First Amendment is pretty clear on that. So anyway, then more quotes.
Also, a lot of founding fathers were secular humanists. Oh God, it's such a weird phrase.
Yeah,
That's how you know he was like why the Groypers wouldn't be into him, because he still like talks like he's at Hillsdale College or something. Like, anyway, keep going.
Okay, so here are some quotes he said on race. He said, "If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified." He also said, "If you are a WNBA pot-smoking black lesbian, do you get treated better than a United States Marine?" The fuck? He said,
that was about Brittany Griner.
Oh, but still, goddamn, Jesus.
Yeah. They really hate the WNBA, but yeah, that would have been about Brittany Griner.
Okay, thanks for that. He also said, "Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more." Oh, by the way, at the time that Charlie Kirk got shot, there was someone who was debating him on the issue of like gun violence. And I forgot the nature of the question, but what Charlie Kirk said right before he got shot was like, does that include gang violence? Which is like a dog whistle that basically, like, he would try to downplay often the issue of mass shootings at school. And the irony is that it's not endorsing it, but the irony is that he got shot speaking on a college campus, which one can debate whether or not that counts as a school shooting. I mean, it does, technically, but it's not like a mass shooting at a school because it's one person. So it's more like a political assassination happening on a university campus. But Um, yeah, he was trying to like reframe the debate of gun violence to focus on the issue of black crime. So that quote I just read, I'll read it again. Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more. I mean, most of the hate crimes are like committed by white people against black people. That's like the biggest number of hate crimes.
Yeah,
But anyway,
and it's like even in cities, and this is probably a good segue because you say it's from Arlington Heights, which is
yeah, let's
suburban
talk about that.
Chicago, which
Mm-hmm.
it's not very far from where I was staying. It's like on the west side, kind of by the airport. And yeah, I will say that like suburban Chicago is like very much a hotbed for fascism, and a lot of people who say they're from Chicago but spent their whole life in the suburbs, um, they really do have this idea that like the city itself is this war zone. I mean, as Trump was trying to like, he was banking on that when he was trying to send the National Guard to Chicago. I'm a little bummed out that I'm not going to be there for it. Um, but it's funny because Nick Fuentes is also from suburban Chicago, but a different suburb, uh,
Yeah,
Berwyn.
let me look. So
But
Fuentes.
Arlington Heights is actually where the Bears are trying to move their new stadium to. Funny enough.
Oh, so just to add to clarify. So like yeah, so he Nick Fuentes was born in Chicago but grew up in LaGrange Park, Illinois. And I'll mention this because I mean we'll kind of this will definitely tie into um as we talk about Charlie Kirk and even the motive of the shooter. Fuentes is of Italian, Irish, and Mexican descent. So I believe he has a grandparent who's Mexican, which is where Nick Fuentes gets the last name Fuentes. But yeah, he grew up. Yeah, Nick Fuentes grew up in Lagrange Park, Illinois. Like if you, oh, I'm
Okay.
just looking at
Yeah,
the.
actually, that's where I worked. It was LaGrange, so
Oh,
that's also a suburb.
okay,
So it
right,
is,
okay,
but like it's very much like the city itself is, I think, 30% white, 30% black, 30% Latino. And I would say not, there's definitely diverse suburbs in Chicagoland, but it is also like the ones that are like these white bastions, they really do um have have this mindset. And I mean it's yeah, he's very much like the Midwestern flavor of racism, which I'm a little more attuned to, which, you know, whenever like crime goes up or whatever in the city, I mean, the idea that they're targeting white people is insane. Like that's, kids run around and do dumb shit always, and when it's black kids that run around and do dumb shit, it's a matter of national security apparently. But like most of the, I don't know how you can do that and then do the black on black violence thing because they don't really relate to each other. Like, but it just goes to show that like, you know, the right never exists in reality. And like it none what actually is going on in this country, like it doesn't actually matter to them. What matters is what they can get people afraid of. So it's just the same old bullshit, but I can see like where he's coming from. Not where he's coming from. I can see how the environment from which he came. I would say that. Um, because yeah, they I feel like Midwestern suburban racism is like they really do believe that, they are entitled to all the benefits of being the richest country in a globe-trotting empire without any of, the consequence or just any of the facts of what goes into that. It's you can't have an all-white globe spanning empire. Like that's just not how it works. It's not how this country has ever worked. Like, they are, but they know that, and they know that their social supremacy is precarious, and so that's why they need to do all this violence to keep their, you know, place at the top of the social hierarchy.
Yeah. So actually, yeah. So we'll continue with Charlie Kirk's biography. So now that we have like a idea of the environment in which he was raised in, uh, so apparently, so his father, Robert W. Kirk, was an architect who apparently was involved in the construction of Trump Tower. It's interesting. His mother was a former trader with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, but then switched to becoming a mental health counselor. And Charlie Kirk, by the way, I'm just kind of reading just like his bits of details of his biography on a Wikipedia page, and there's sources to it. So I'm just kind of reading off of that. Um, and he later he Charlie Kirk described his parents as moderate Republicans. And by the way, so Charlie Kirk, he was killed at Utah Valley campus. And actually, before I continue the details, I wanted to mention just a little bit of quick like historical tidbits on Utah. Because I was kind of nerding out. I was like curious about like Utah. Because yeah, he was at a TPUS debate at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, which is Orem, Utah is located kind of uh like about 45 miles south of Salt Lake City. So I think it's part of like the not really the Salt Lake City metropolitan area, but it's like outside of it. Anyway, and I'll say this, like, so Utah itself, like, Utah is mostly white and it's mostly Republican. And I was looking at like how Utah voted. Utah has been deeply Republican since 1968. So Utah has consistently voted Republican for like almost 60 years at this point. So Utah is very conservative. It went for Trump in 2024. And I think I think I looked it up. There were only a couple counties that went for okay, yeah, like kind of I think it's Salt Lake County, which is where Salt Lake City is, Summit and Grand counties. Those are the only areas that went for Kamala Harris in 2024. And the Salt Lake metropolitan area, I think out of all of Utah, that's like the bluest area. It's the more liberal because it's kind of similar. Like, you know, major urban areas tend to lean more liberal. So, but Utah itself, it was a territory before it became a state, but it was part of the Compromise of 1850, which was basically the Compromise of 1850 was basically it was a political compromise in the U.S. when it came to it was basically to diffuse tensions between slave and free states. But these are the years that led up to the Civil War, like 10 years after. So, but so it was like a compromise that it didn't like obviously didn't settle it, and it obviously didn't settle anything because the Civil War still happened. But at the time, there is like the Oregon Territory, Minnesota Territory, Utah Territory, New Mexico Territory, and after that, like it was how to handle the territories that were acquired after the Mexican-American War. So to give some context, there are a bunch of factors that led up to the Mexican-American War, but one of them was that basically the Mexican-American War occurred from 1846 to 1848. During that time, Mexico had gained their independence like about 20 years prior. And so in the Mexican territory that's now part of the U.S. and throughout Mexico as a country, slavery was abolished. Part of the reason why slavery was abolished is because Mexico did have a president of African descent, Vicente Guerrero. He was the one who basically was responsible for abolishing slavery. So that's why Mexico abolished slavery after gaining independence from Spain. And so slavery was abolished in Mexico's territory. Then there was a war between the United States and Mexico, and part of it had to do with the issue of slavery. particularly like with some of the I believe
Texas
like
especially.
yeah, Texas. There you go. Yeah, so particularly like the some of the Mexicans in Texas, like the part of the tension was over slavery essentially, and so there's a war, and so that territory that the U.S. got from Mexico, basically the states, not countries, sorry, states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Nevada, I believe Colorado, and there's a lot of territory that the U.S. got. So the issue is what to do with that land, and so part of the compromise was California was entered as a free state. It banned the slave trade in Washington D.C. And it established territorial government for the territory of Utah. But there were no restrictions, though, on whether or not Utah would be free or slave. They let that up to popular sovereignty in Utah. So I just wanted to give some background because I thought it was interesting, just the history of Utah itself as a territory. And like I am now kind of referring to Utah as like the Israel of Mormons, because like that's like their, I don't know, their
Yeah,
promised
I
land or
mean,
whatever.
they do think about it as Zion.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Zion National Park. Um, it is. I mean, I get mad because Utah is really pretty, I think, like, but why, the Mormons get it? But it was, yes, it's generally been left to fester among its own devices. I do find it a little bit fascinating that Utah was where it happened, because that was like my first question was like, where was this? Because the guy who told me about it didn't tell me where it happened. And then I was like, yeah, they are pretty crazy out there because like, you know, respect for all religions, but Mormonism is can get pretty weird, and the people, if you break from it, it can be very isolating and um like troubling. It can be a pretty traumatic experience. So I can understand like why there's more uh violent tendencies, but also just because it's like you're in the middle of nowhere, and your mind can just kind of be left up to its own devices. That said, it doesn't really seem like the person that they've arrested for this, was any card carrying leftist. I saw something where I was like, they're interviewing local leftist groups, and it's like, okay, yes, interview the Salt Lake DSA. Like, what? They're not going to be very helpful. Um, it really seems more like what's his name, Tyler Robinson. Um, at least for what we know now, that he was more like he was actually probably a Groyper, which is like more the Nick Fuentes aligned
Yeah.
part of the MAGA right.
Hmm.
I mean, one of the they said
Yeah.
like because initially they're like it's got transgender ideology on the casings, which is like I don't even know what that means. How do you fit all that on a shell casing?
I mean, like, I'll continue. Yeah, I'll continue with Charlie Kirk's biography, but like, I'm gonna
Okay,
tie it in. I'm actually. I'm gonna tie in some of that because I think it's
all
important. Because
right.
then we can like kind of. It'll be good to like transition. But like, uh, another thing. I was looking up the racial demographics of Utah. There are hardly any black people. So like, now there is like a black history in Utah. Like there were like a minority of African American like pioneers who had like settled in Utah, but like um but black people have statistically and long been a minority in Utah. I think the
Acco-
Salt Lake City
according
air.
according to the Mormon Church, they didn't have souls until 1978, so I can understand.
Right. Right, yeah. Yeah, that's probably why. I mean also ties into the history of racism within among Mormons, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, yeah, they have a pretty unique they have their own history of anti-blackness. Like I do think so. I was looking up Salt Lake City over time has diversified, but not that much. It's still majority white, and most of the quote unquote minorities that are the largest ethnic minority population that's growing are Latinos. I think it's around like 10%. But like black people and Asians, it's like less than 10%. So like the right wing who are trying to blame it on black people and like it's like being if you are a leftist and or a minority, a racial minority in Utah, like you are outnumbered. Like you're like it. So anyway, so I want to kind of mention that just the context of Utah, but to tie it into like Charlie Kirk, like okay, my overall assessment of Charlie Kirk's legacy, and this is how it'll fit into his biography, and even tie into like even the beef between him and Nick Fuentes, is that I think Charlie Kirk's biggest accomplishment while he was alive was that he essentially mainstreamed white Christian nationalism into American culture. I think he was responsible for that. And it had a huge influence on the MAGA movement of today in terms of where American conservatism and the American right wing is at. So, and I think like Charlie Kirk as a figure in his biography, when you look at it, I see it as like a very interesting bridge between an era of conservatism that was on its way out, and then like the inauguration of a new era of conservatism, which is the era of Trump MAGA conservatism that we're currently dealing with in this current time. So that's why I think looking at Charlie Kirk as a figure is really important, because understanding like where he fits helps us make sense of where we're at right now with the current right-wing government that the U.S. has. His father donated to Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. He was also a Boy Scout, earned the rank of Eagle Scout. Fun fact, I was briefly in Boy Scouts, but what happened is that I joined the track team and didn't look back. So I found other interesting hobbies in Boy Scouts. If you're like
I was in Cub Scouts, but all my friends had left by the time I was done with that, so I felt no need to go into Boy Scouts.
Yeah, because Boy Scouts, like the stuff that's kind of interesting, like like camping and how to start a fire and stuff like that stuff is cool, but it is it has a history of like right wing politics and culture, and like there's some reactionary shit that like I think they've tried to like polish up in recent years because there's been some backlash. Like they tried to embrace, for example, like gender neutrality. So now it's like Scouting for America versus just Boy Scouts. But I do think like looking back, for like a young guy to have some sort of activity that could socialize him into some sort of masculine identity, I guess, like socializing. And when I mean masculinity, I mean more like socializing in terms of that transition from boyhood to manhood. I personally think getting like young boys in sports is probably better than like Boy Scouts. Personally, like it's like if you get like your young son in like I don't know, the football
from the stories I've heard from other people who are in Boy Scouts, sometimes things got a little weird. But even if that didn't happen, it was just like they would just go crazy.
And also it's just.
I will say that like being an Eagle Scout like mints you as like being the golden boy, and like he was definitely the golden boy of the right for a long time.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and like in addition to that, him being like the golden boy, when he was in middle school, Charlie Kirk read books by Milton Friedman, which he attributed to his political awakening. So Charlie Kirk's political awakening into the right wing was reading Milton Friedman in middle school. He also like volunteered for the Senate campaign for Illinois Republican Mark Kirk, which he has no relation to. And in his senior year, he created a campaign to reverse a price increase for cookies at his school. But this is really important right here. This is like to Peter's point about him being the golden boy. He wrote an essay for Breitbart News in which he alleged that like there's liberal bias in high school textbooks. And that led to his first media appearance on Fox Business at the age of 17. So, this is like his first foray into like really getting into the right. And that's like when the right starts to notice him as like, this is our darling boy. And this is one thing I was thinking about this. I think this is how like the Republican Party is better at passing the baton from one generation to the next. Whereas the Democrats is just a bunch of old fossils who are like all in hospice care at this point. Like the Democratic Party, like they are not passing the baton to like Ilhan Omar or like young DSA members. Like see how like look at the way they're reacting to Zoran Mamdani. Like there's no baton passing. Meanwhile, the Republicans, like they really started to embrace Charlie Kirk at the age of 17, right out of high school. He also applied to West Point, but was rejected in 2012. Then he attended Harper College, but dropped out after one semester. But he went to a youth empowerment day at Benedictine University, and that's when he met Bill Montgomery, who was a retiree, but he was then... Bill Montgomery was a Tea Party-backed legislative candidate. And Bill Montgomery encouraged Charlie Kirk to engage in political activism full time, and Bill Montgomery and Charlie Kirk, they co-founded together Turning Point USA, which described itself at the time. This is funny. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and there's an article in here where it cites the founding of the TPUSA, and the headline is, "This boy wonder is building the conservative MoveOn.org in a Lamont garage." So yeah, he was treated like the boy wonder, Charlie Kirk. In Turning Point USA, it was basically what it said was it was supposed to be a grassroots organization to rival liberal groups such as MoveOn.org.
I just want to interject. That's crazy. Well, it's crazy because it's like, yeah, in the early 2000s, like the Democrats, liberals were definitely like more present online and were more organized online. And I guess
I think the 2010s, right? You're talking about the 2010s.
Well, I'm saying like MoveOn.org. That was like Howard Dean and
right,
that kind of stuff
true.
going back all the way to there. Like that was that was something that the right was afraid of, and that like the Democrats had this infrastructure and they've just done nothing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they've gotten massively out-organized and outspent on that. It's just fascinating to hear that like they were like, we need our own MoveOn.org retire, because yeah, I mean he really did he really was like a forefather of the right-wing internet, because there really wasn't that. There's just like Free Republic forums and Drudge Report
and Breitbart.
Breitbart.
Yeah, because he wrote. Yeah, and in that era, and this is why I wanted to go through his biography a bit, because I do think Charlie Kirk was part of that transition from the by the late Bush years, Bush era conservatism was like, it was like a joke at that point because of the failure of the Iraq War, the criticism of the war on terror, like the Bush neoconservative movement. Like when Obama won, for those of you who remember, in the days of 2008, when Obama won, people were like, "This is the death of the Republican Party," and the Republican Party, like, they got their asses kicked during that election, similar to how the Democrats got an ass kicking in 2024. It was similar in 2008 when the Republicans lost and Obama won. Like, Obama cleaned house in 2008, which I think that's one of the failures of the Obama administration, which is that there was so much populist energy behind Obama that he could have done a lot more rather than like the fucking neoliberalism that really was his his administration for 8 years. Like, he could have been like a truly progressive Roosevelt-like president, because there was so much popular energy and support behind Obama. But at the time, while that was going on for Obama, again, the Republican Party was like a joke at that point. And you had Drudge Report, you had Breitbart, and then you had the Tea Party. But at the time, while all these liberals were like it's so funny looking back, because liberals were so afraid of the Tea Party, but really they were kind of like a joke. I mean, there were some elements of like even some elements of the left were saying like, okay, the Tea Party represents like white working class angst, and Obama's not doing enough. Like, I do remember there's some people in left media were saying that point. Like, usually they were boomers, but like the Tea Party, they didn't really have that kind of they weren't really popular with young people. Like, the Tea Party were just a bunch of like old white people who were like, get your Obama government hands off my Medicare. Like, they were like a joke compared to what's going on fucking now. But Charlie Kirk, he was a transition from like the old Breitbart Tea Party Republicans, and he, I think, helped usher in a new era of conservatism of the MAGA movement. And really what Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA did, what they did is they turned college liberals into public enemy, like number one, or one of many public enemies, because there's a lot of enemies that the right has, but they turned college liberals into like a public enemy. And so a lot of like the rhetoric we hear now of anti-DEI, anti-wokeism, you can thank Charlie Kirk for that in terms of like making that a thing. Because remember, there was like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, and Charlie Kirk, and their whole shtick was like, we're going to debate these college liberals and make them look stupid. And that had some, like, there were some wheels turning even during the Obama years, because it happened, I would say, like the second Obama term. During Obama's second term, I think like that's when like it became a thing for conservatives to go on college campuses, and their whole thing was trying to make college liberals look stupid. And so it's kind of like, if you were to compare it to like the 60s and 70s, it was the college hippies that scared the shit out of middle America old white people from the silent generation. They're scared of like their kids going to college, their boomer children going to college and becoming like bra burning feminists, white people who are saying like kill whitey, fuck the system, and burning their draft cards. Like, that's what scared the shit out of like the silent generation white people who lived in middle America. And that's who Nixon appealed to with this Law and Order campaign. There's a similar strategy, I think, that people like Kirk, Ben Shapiro did, was like basically in the eyes of like, you know, just maybe normal white people or people in the Republican base. I would say they gave Republicans like a new enemy, which were college liberals who were, you know, talking about like, because really the Obama era of liberalism, a lot of it was like cultural liberalism. Like, a lot of it was about representation matters, yada, yada, yada. And like, there's some, you know, like, I'm not opposed to it, obviously, but, you know, like a lot of it, what kind of did some of it, like I don't think it went far enough in terms of actual like self-determination for marginalized people, but that's another topic. But Charlie Kirk, he made essentially college liberals like the enemy for the right wing, which I think again is comparable to the 60s and 70s, where like hippies were like the ones who scared the shit out of like the silent generation of white conservative. And it was through that Charlie Kirk would get his points across. And I think Charlie Kirk, he helped to push the Overton window for the right wing, because as he would like debate, and again, these are a lot of times, okay, people in college, especially if they're young, like their heart's in the right place, but they're still figuring their politics out. And so to me, it's like he wasn't really like debating the most, I guess, like politically sophisticated people. Because sometimes, like when he would go to, I think like some of the Ivy League schools, and when he would get pushback, he would be made to look stupid. But also, what he also did, this is really important for the people who want to frame Charlie Kirk as a free speech warrior. He Turning Point USA created a professor. They created a professor watch list of college professors throughout the country who basically were accused of spreading quote unquote leftist propaganda. And that was part of like their anti woke crusade that now with Trump 2.0, that's becoming like official federal government policy. So I think that's really important to consider for like people who want to frame Charlie Kirk as like this sort of uh this this uh this hero of free speech and the open exchange of ideas. Like, no, that wasn't what Kirk and Turning Point USA were about. Really, what they were about was trying to turn universities and college students, trying to make them to be like a public enemy, because they were trying to frame it as if you go to college, you're going to become a crazy woke leftist who like is they're going to dye their hair blue and like talk about feminism and like you know, which is weird because like oh they're so against people being empathetic to like they're so
Yeah, well,
afraid of
there
people.
is a quote attributed to
Yeah,
Charlie Kirk where he's like, "I don't like
yeah,
empathy,"
right,
which
exactly,
is
yeah.
crazy. But yeah, to that point, it is fascinating to think about how like now Harvard is like an enemy of the president, and like that, back in the day, the right wing was complaining about affirmative action because they wanted to get into the Ivy League. They still respected the Ivy League, whether they should or shouldn't, different question, you know, and I think they also, the ones that still read understood, the role universities have played in the American empire and that they actually play a very valuable role. And so it is kind of silly to attack them as being the enemy. I remember just offhand, like in Occupy, it was always like the state colleges that were much more active than, the elite universities. But yes, yeah, he really did do a lot of work in fomenting this idea. I mean, and I think this is more just like, historical circumstances as much because like it is at the time when Gen Z is like, Gen Z is much more averse to college in general because of student loans being out of control and just the economy in general. And a lot of Gen Z people are just like, well, why would I pay all that money to get a degree that like I'm not going to use, or without understanding that the degree is not really the point, or they just all study fucking business and marketing, which is another thing. Which in my mind, like, why would you why would you take out student loans just to study business? Like, at least
It's
study the thing you want to.
at least study economics because like I feel like, or I would say for anyone
Yeah.
like trying to get into like that like the more quote unquote practical degree would be like economics or accounting, but like business and marketing to me seems like it's funny. Like the trope is like, oh, these liberal students are going to study underwater basket weaving. I'm like, oh, so what is a marketing degree? Like, what the fuck does that do? Like,
It does less than a gender studies degree. At least you have to like actually read. But yeah, I to the point that like it really has caught on, just like that college is I mean, kind of is a scam. Look, if I are in a situation where I did have student loans and didn't, you know, depend on the largesse of Stanford University, might have a differing opinion about it. But it is very much just that, like, that line of attack, I think really took off. And I do think it was a big part of, Gen Z's right wing turn, is because, like, it's not just that like colleges are indoctrination factories, it's that the idea that you should spend 4 years of your life on your intellectual development, um, not just because of, earning potential, but because of the benefits to you and to society at large, has gone out the window in many ways. And I do think that Charlie Kirk played a big role, because it definitely just sort of the generic anti-college sentiment, which isn't political one way or the other, but can very easily glom onto, woke liberalism is out of control at university campuses and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think now would be a good idea to talk about the shooter. Wait, before I just want to make sure I covered all my bases.
Alleged shooter.
Yeah. Uh yeah, I think I took care of like all the stuff I want to talk about when it came to his to Charlie Kirk's biography and what he accomplished. And again, like my overall assessment of Charlie Kirk's legacy is that he I think he did push the Overton window for the right wing in the US, because especially when it came to race issues, because like if you think about like the partisan spectrum on race from liberal to conservative, the liberalism in America, the way liberals approach race is more of like they're not pushing for something like, let's say, self-determination for African Americans or full-on reparations, redistribution of wealth. Like actual liberals and the Democratic Party, like they don't go that far. It's more just the liberal political consensus since the 1964 Civil Rights Act has basically been more an emphasis on protecting the gains of the Civil Rights Act, but not going further. And that was a critique of like that's why the Black Power movement emerged, because the argument of the Black Power movement in the 70s was that, okay, we got rid of legalized racial segregation, but there are still other issues that African Americans face, particularly when it comes to institutional racism, Black America being an internal colony within the U.S. And so, but liberals like don't go that far in terms of what they advocate when it comes to issues of race. And it took liberals quite some time, frankly, to see police brutality as an actual issue. Now, what have liberals done to address it? They've achieved jack shit. They haven't done anything. I mean, if anything, like liberals, what's funny with liberals is that they'll still argue for like tough on crime policies. Like that is like the hypocrisy of liberalism, that I can see why this generation of the right wing is able to, I wouldn't say pick off some black voters, but they're able to kind of communicate well with the frustration of black voters who are sick of the Democratic Party. The right wing is good at picking up on that, because it is true that the Democratic Party hasn't achieved shit for black people since 1964. And in a lot of ways, the Democratic Party is responsible for where Black America is at as a community, like in terms of our material conditions. So there's that. But the conservatives, from I would say Nixon in '68 up to Charlie Kirk, like their approach to race has basically been like, one, deny that systemic racism even exists, like it wasn't even an issue. But their whole thing was like, the problems that face black people is because of behavior, personal responsibility, and black like the problems of black culture, black American culture. Like they would make those arguments as like, oh, this is the reason why black poverty exists, because of culture, it's because of behavior, personal responsibility, yada yada yada. They wouldn't openly advertise their antipathy toward black people. They wouldn't explicitly say fuck black people. They wouldn't explicitly say the N-word. Even though, like, behind their dog whistle rhetoric, you can tell like that's what they really want to say, but they know they couldn't say it because post 64 Civil Rights Act, they knew like, okay, we can't keep fucking saying that. It was, let me pull, hold on, but before I continue, we'll pull up that quote. I believe was
the Lee Atwater quote, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up. It was hold on. Let me find that quote before I continue. It was really about the Southern thread. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna pull out this quote from Lee Atwater. And for those of you who don't know who Lee Atwater is, I mean, he was a shrewd motherfucker, but he was a political consultant and strategist for the Republican Party. He was an advisor for Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. And he was responsible for the Southern strategy. But this quote, I would say, that he said, really encapsulates the Republican Party's approach when it came to race. Which, and again, I want to contrast it with like Charlie Kirk, and then talk about the shooter, and then Nick Fuentes. This is the famous quote by Lee Atwater. He said, it's in 1981, I think, that it was an interview in 1981. He said, you start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. And by 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you. Backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract now that you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And a byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt. Sorry. A byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we are doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around and saying we want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger nigger. So basically, essentially, the American conservative movement when it came to race before 1964, they were just saying like fuck niggers, hang niggers, fuck black people, stay over there, blah 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 blah, nigger nigger nigger. Like that's what they would say, right? 1964 Civil Rights Act passed, outlaws legalized racial discrimination, and then there's a bunch of other cultural movements when it comes to like women's liberation, LGBTQ liberation, etc., etc. So they figured out like, okay, we can't openly say our racism anymore, but what the Republican Party figured out that they can do is basically, okay, well, we can start cutting taxes and social programs and hurt black people that way without openly advertising that that's what they want in the end. So that was a Republican Party strategy for really from the 70s up until today's era, which is like they would code their racism. They would code it behind abstract language. Charlie Kirk, what he did, he was the first iteration of saying like, I'm going to go even further. Like, you know what? Fuck the Civil Rights Act. Like, why should we have it? Like, black people were better off before the Civil Rights Act. Blah, 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 blah. He was the first person really to say that openly. Then you get to fucking Nick Fuentes, who's basically like, he wants to go even further.
Now he's just back to saying it.
Right, exactly. Now Nick Fuentes is like, he just wants to say the word nigger. He's like, you know what? Blah, 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 yeah, nigger and blah, 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 blah. And then I think there's an interview he did with like a fucking black conservative or some shit. He openly said to him, like, basically the only reason why you're here is like for us to get our anti-black message, like with a black person saying it. Like, I think, I don't know where it was. I'm just paraphrasing, but Nick Fuentes is basically like, yeah, back to like 1950s and 40s of saying the N-word. So the shooter, yeah, Tyler Robinson, age 22, he's a suspected shooter. His father, who's also like a local minister but used to be a sheriff, by the way, was the one who turned him in. And apparently, as of
cop
this
kid, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, and if you see pictures of Tyler Robinson, I was going to say Lee Atwater, Tyler Robinson, there are pictures of him, holding guns from a very early age. And apparently, so yeah, the shot that was fired, it was like somewhere like 200 yards with a bolt action rifle. Like when I was at first thinking like, okay, was this like a professional who did it? But it seems like rather than him being like a professional, he was obviously groomed from a very young age to know how to shoot guns. So yeah, he had a bolt action rifle. I don't know what the round was, but basically he knew what the fuck he was doing. And I'm sure, like, I think apparently there are scopes on rifles that are damn near like military grade, because like the average police sniper, I looked it up. I think police snipers are trained to shoot like within the range of 70 yards. Cuz typically like when police shoot, it's more close quarters. It's not like that far. Like if the police are going to engage someone with deadly force. Most cops are trained like by using a pistol and maybe an assault rifle, but um like I think usually the snipers are usually like on SWAT teams or something. But I don't know like if they have like rifles where it's like if they're trained to shoot like 200 yards. I mean, if like your average cop can't like shoot that far. If there is a police sniper might who could shoot that far, probably like on a SWAT team or something. But usually it's like guys in the military who can like shoot that far, particularly like if
Yeah.
they're Marines or they're snipers. But apparently like shows the type of guns that are available. I think there's like apparently sometimes there's like military surplus hardware for guns. And so this young man probably got like a military style sniper that allowed him to fire at that distance, that he was able to shoot Charlie Kirk in the fucking neck. Like,
Not hit the
so
gigantic target of his head. Sorry, had to get one in.
yeah. Again, we're not justifying it, not justifying. Um, uh, but I'm just saying, like, look, like that's to get that kind of shot from far
Yeah.
away.
Well, apparently, what I've heard is that like if you're a good hunter, you can probably make that shot, which I think kind
Oh,
of makes sense.
right. Yeah.
Like if you grew up hunting, then it would be doable, you know.
That does make sense. But again, it kind of gets back to like requiring some further training beforehand. Some like you get the like your typical average Joe like is not going to have the ability to snipe that far just willy nilly. Like,
No.
you have to do a lot of practice, get some practice in, and
But
some
I can see
yeah,
if you grow up in a right-wing family and if his dad's a cop, obviously he's going to be around guns a lot. I can see
yeah,
how that would be possible without needing to be like, oh yeah, this was definitely a professional that did this.
yeah, yeah. Like sorry, there's something that came up. So the motive of the shooter, we're not entirely sure yet, but he did grow up in a Republican household. I mean, in Utah, so heavily Republican. So this is Utah is not a bastion of liberalism, and Utah Valley University, it is outside of Salt Lake City. So this is not like a bastion of liberalism, you know. Uh like yeah. So um what I've seen so far, again, this is just so far. Um like it seems like his politics are like incoherent. Like it's a result of what happens when you're terminally online, especially if you're young. Because again, he's 22, so this is you're talking about is really Gen Z. Um, yeah, because if he's 22, that means he's born in 2003. Yeah, 2003. So yeah, it's Gen Z. So, uh, like, because the I guess the inscriptions. There we go. Yeah, that's what I was looking. The word I was looking for. Inscriptions on the bullet casings. It had shit like of reference to furries. Hey fascist catch with up arrow, right arrow, and 3 down arrows. And apparently that's a reference to the game Helldivers 2. So, um,
Then one that said, "If
yeah,
you can read this, you're gay." LMAO.
yeah, right, yeah, he had that. Yeah, it was like if you read this, you're gay. LMAO.
So
Um,
maybe that was the transgender ideology. I don't know,
yeah,
but
and now,
it
yeah, and
doesn't
now
seem
like
like he was a
it's
leftist.
right. He's not a leftist. This is not a leftist, and um, I mean the right wing, they are trying their best to blame the left for this, but like they don't have anything to go with so far as of this recording. Um, uh, um, oh, I just heard right before we started recording that apparently he had a roommate who was transgender, and I feel like there's some dog whistling there, like, oh, he must have been influenced by the transgender ideology through his roommate, and that's why because apparently the roommate is now cooperating with authorities, because they did arrest him, but he's not cooperating, he's not talking, but um, I think that um I don't know. To me, he seems like the type who is just terminally online. And when you go down those online rabbit holes through gaming, streaming, TikTok, it can lead to like just some really batshit incoherent politics. But apparently it seems like he was a fan of Nick Fuentes because he does seem like a groiper. Uh, in terms of the meme references, because there's like overlap between like some, I guess, gaming discords, and I'm not saying being a gamer turns you reactionary. I don't want to make sure people don't get that, but um, that does seem to be how like the right wing seems to recruit. Kind of similar, like if you listen to one of my solo episodes, I talked about how um the right wing does predominate spaces like gyms and weightlifting, like that culture. So there is a way in which like the right wing is able to shape American culture through these different activities, like self help, weightlifting, gaming, and it particularly the last two, gaming and weightlifting and stuff like combat sports. Like those are predominantly male spaces. So I think that is how like some young men get roped into the right wing. And this guy, to me, he strikes me as definitely not a leftist. Um, Probably influenced by Nick Fuentes, and I say Nick Fuentes because Nick Fuentes had to like he had to basically put a warning out to his followers and condemn the shooting, because I think Nick Fuentes was worried that it was one of his fans who did the shooting, because this will tie in because there's a beef between Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk, because yeah, Nick Fuentes is he wants to go full blown white nationalism and Nazi, and Fuentes thinks that Charlie Kirk was too soft. Even Laura Loomer, in a deleted tweet, she had some critiques of Charlie Kirk, but now she's the one saying, "Oh, people should get fired if they don't mourn Charlie Kirk correctly." But like, so there were people on the right who didn't like Charlie Kirk because they felt he was fascism light, while the right wing right now, want to go they want to go full bore with Nazism and fascism. So the right wing has moved on. I really think the energy with the American right, as of this moment, in terms of the moment we're in, that the energy is with Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and Laura Loomer. That's the American right wing. And they've kind of moved past Charlie Kirk, I think. Which is part of why I found his death to be kind of weird, because I thought like he had become a little bit irrelevant for the right.
Yeah, exactly. What a triumvirate there. It is. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because like in my initial reaction, I was like, I could see how like a Gen Z like edgelord leftist would like get so mad, like who's out in the middle of nowhere in Utah. and think that like Charlie Kirk is a worthy target. Um, but then you know, it it does seem generally that it would be like probably someone from the right taking him out. But even then, it still just feels like that anyone would feel the motivation to do so. I think that, trying to like the kind of Discord, alt-right Groyper humor, it's more nihilistic than it is ideological. I don't like comparing but it is kind of like drill music in the sense of like it celebrates violence for the meme purposes, and I guess Charlie Kirk has been, a meme in and of himself for a long time. But it is, it celebrates it for its own sake. Um it's not really like there's a goal to it, which I think is what's more disturbing about it. So, but also I think that MAGA is dealing with, you know, any kind of post-revolutionary crisis where it's like they won, but now who's gonna, take up the mantle after that? And so now they're all fighting themselves, and they're all, they're dealing with the problem of the fact that they've won, and but like there's nothing that unifies them outside of Trump. So everyone's racing to get to be the next person, and I think that in that kind of chaos we may see more like internecine violence on the right, because these people are all out of their minds. I mean, like nobody who makes a career out of right-wing politics is a picture of mental health in any way. So, who's to know? But I do, I guess I don't want to say I feel good, but I feel like this isn't necessarily like, this isn't our game. And so I think what's going on is something that will continue to go on. That is the result of having an ideology that basically just worships violence without, you know, and that's basically it. There isn't really a second part to it. Um, versus when that comes into just the everyday realities of politics and governance. So that might be my I don't want to say final thought, but I think that's where I've come down on it, is just like I don't know, I've been listening, going through more Roman Empire stuff, and the degree to, the Roman Empire, which all these people idolize and wish America could be more like, the degree to which these kinds of killings were commonplace was, yeah, it was pretty normal, because it's just when you've got an empire that this big, um and there's, especially when there's a point where it's not expanding and there's nothing to like take that tension away, then people will immediately just start fighting each other over who gets to control it. So I think we are probably at that point in American history, um, which, I'm not happy about, but I think that, those are sort of the historical material realities. And, you know, I, I mean, yeah, you know, when you're also currently helping conduct a genocide, like, yeah, that just ratchets up the ambient violence of everything. So, that's what this country is, and it's going to take a lot before it is able to break that cycle, because, violence just, any system based on violence can only preserve itself with more violence until, um, there's a full on societal collapse, basically. So, I don't know what to say other than that, I guess.
Um, yeah, whatchamacallit? Um, I mean, the only thing I'd probably add is, well, just to briefly mention, there are some people speculating that this is like connected to Israel, that because people are bringing up that Charlie Kirk was becoming critical of Israel over time, because he was like a supporter of Israel, but because there are elements of the right that are becoming critical of Israel, while Nick Fuentes is more like full on anti-Semitic. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. I'm personally not buying the idea that the reason why Charlie Kirk was assassinated is because is connected to his views on Israel. Um, who knows? But to me, what it looks like so far is that this is what happens when your brain is broken from online and being influenced by people like Nick Fuentes. This young man strikes me as a griper. Obviously not a leftist. Probably more right of center, but his views just seem like incoherent and all over the place. And that might be why he shot Charlie Kirk. I don't like. It's probably not like, who knows. It's probably not for like some greater grand political vision to like fulfill. Like, it's probably not even that. Again, I'm just talking from the seat of my pants. We don't have all the details for sure, but from I'm just basing this off of like what we know so far as of this recording. That like it's probably not part of like a grander political goal. It's probably just like, this dude probably has some like very incoherent political beliefs. And I think this is a result of, I'm not solely blaming the internet, but I do think it's a result of when I was just thinking about this. This might even be like getting toward my final point. I do think this is a result of this country getting dumber. Like this is what happens. I think like this. I really think this country, writ large, is getting dumber. Like, people are not. Like, I was just reading, especially as a teacher, this is something that concerns me. Is that the math and reading score levels for American youth is down. Like, there are a lot of youth who, like, the literacy is going down. And I'm not even, and this is not about like they can't read, period. But it's something I've noticed. The attention spans have declined because they're so addicted to their screens. It's hard for them to pay attention, to sit down and read a book and reflect and stuff like that. And it's not even just youth, it's adults. More and more people are getting their information through online, and it's not always through the best of sources. It's not always through like the most vetted of sources, and it's easy to go down these weird rabbit holes. And so when people are becoming less educated and less like the critical thinking is going down, I think people become vulnerable to all kinds of crazy shit, and it could lead to like incoherent politics. And when you combine that with a shitload of guns, and on top of that, the material conditions is getting worse. So you have the material conditions getting worse in this country, and then you have a population that is like just less educated. You combine that, bad material conditions, shitty economy, people being less like educated, and not even, I'm saying like formal education. I mean educated in terms of like the ability to critically think and look at the situation of what's going on. You have that combined with like easy access to guns and a very real imperial decline. I think more of this like tit for tat violence is just going to become normal, and I think that'll be like my final thought. That'll be my final thought. I think, unfortunately, more of this one-on-one violence is going to become normal. And I think, Peter, you're right. Probably within like the next, I think like once like Charlie Kirk once he's buried, like after the funeral, which I think it's like in a week from now. I think like once Charlie Kirk is buried, um, people are probably going to move on from this. They're going to forget about it because there's already been like other political assassinations. And just for the sake of it, I do want to mention that earlier this year there were Democratic politicians who were shot. Like uh, State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, um, like they were shot and killed in February, and then John Hoffman and his wife, um, along with like I think Ryan Winkler. I want to make sure I get their names right. Like they were shot in June of 2025. So and like that was like it was like a blip. I remember when it happened. It was like a blip. Like it just happened. Oh my god, this is sad, and people forgot about it. And then with Charlie Kirk, I think you're right, Peter. Like when you mentioned the nature of the video, I think because like people saw the video, that like I think that's part of the shock behind it. But uh, like I think people are probably gonna forget about it, and like there might be more of this like random one-on-one violence that happens, especially as this country's empire declines, the economy just gets shittier. Um, People are more vulnerable to propaganda and crazy shit online, and you mix that together, and like when you mix like when you put it in that context, in some way, it's almost not surprising that this kind of political assassination happened, right? Like in some ways, like oh yeah, like when you look at America for what it is and like what's actually going on, like in some ways, this kind of political violence really should not be surprising if you think about it, you know? So, yeah, I think people will probably forget about it, and there might be another shooting that, like, people will get up in arms about, and it'll be the same routine. And even then, like, there was also a school shooting in fucking Colorado the same day that Charlie Kirk got killed. Like, now that's become normal. And as a teacher, it's like us teachers, we have to take school shooter trainings now. Like that's normal now to be a teacher. You have to take trainings on school shootings. I mean, we're not getting fucking paid more. So like this is yeah, I mean it's and then this country went through 2 fucking years of witnessing a genocide play out in live stream, and like everyone's kind of still going about their normal lives, and like it's sad. Free Palestine, boy. Huh. What can we do? It's like yeah, it's sad in that context that like that I think this country is this desensitized to political violence. And political violence, I'm including genocide. I'm including school shootings. I'm including police brutality. Like this country's desensitized to this violence. So, yeah, I agree. I think like probably within like the next couple weeks. I think after the funeral, like once Charlie Kirk is buried, and like people have like shed their tears, people are gonna forget about it because there's gonna be a new like right winger who's gonna like fill. I think there's gonna be someone else to fill Charlie Kirk's shoes, because even when he died, like he was already being eclipsed by other far right figures. So, yeah, that's really my final thought. I have nothing else to say except for uh, those of us who are conscious and care. I think it's important for us to stay vigilant. So, yeah. That's all I gotta say. I mean, do you have anything else to say, Peter? I mean, that's yeah.
Just that.
Because I think you're right. Like what you said earlier about like people are gonna forget. Because I didn't really think about that before we recorded, but I do think you're right. I think people are gonna forget about it. Like it'll just be like, happened, and just like everything else, every other fucking shooting, people just forget about it.
Yeah, I guess all I have to say is yes. I think the fact that anyone saw him as some sort of towering intellect is just proof positive of how stupid this country has become. But that said, there's a little familiarity with like some of these right-wing media figures that like I've been forced to be aware of for, you know, over a decade now. And I guess I will miss his gigantic head and his I really don't think he deserved to go out like that. Um and it's just it's fucked up. Um, you know, he yeah, I guess it's just damn man, shit's crazy. What a
Yeah,
country.
yeah, yeah. I think that's really probably the thing we can conclude on. The sadness is at how normalized this kind of violence is in this country. I truly think that is a sad part, and I think to add on a more humanistic note, my heart truly does go out to his children. I truly feel bad for the kids. Like just and I also hope like there's something this guy on Due Dissidence said, and I'll end on this note just to like make it more um to have some empathy. I hope that people who are fans of Charlie Kirk, I hope that like if they feel bad for Charlie Kirk's children, I think that's good, but I would encourage them to think about the children in Gaza and think about like not just the children who were killed, but there are many other children like Charlie Kirk's children who don't have their parents anymore because they've been killed. So, uh, yeah, I want to mention that on that note that I hope people calling for empathy and in this time, I hope that they. Well, I would encourage them. I don't want to say hope. I'm just saying I would encourage them. So more uh, active kind of call to action rather than like hope. I would encourage them to have some empathy for uh, children in Gaza, the children who've been killed, children who've been injured, and children who are in the same position as Charlie Kirk's children, who no longer have their parents around because of violence. And I really think that if people claim that they are tired of political violence, I would say, yeah, you know what? So am I. But I would include other forms of violence as political violence. So if you care about this form of political violence, you should be concerned about other forms of political violence. And I would encourage those people to seek out ways to inform themselves on those forms of political violence and try to find ways to put a stop to the systems that engage in that political violence. Yeah, actually, I'd rather end on that note. Yeah. Anything else to say? Otherwise, we can sign out. Like, good.
I think that's it.
All right, cool. Yeah, good emergency podcast episode, nearly 2 hours, but it was important to get this out there. Yeah. Before we go out, obviously, like, just, if you like this episode, patreon.com/real Sankara Hours, you can get access to bonus episodes for $5 a month. And by the way, we are this business is a worker cooperative LLC, so emphasis on worker cooperative in terms of structure. So we try to live up to our socialist values through that way. So, yeah, more. If you subscribe, if you become a patron for $5 a month, on your end you get access to bonus content. On our end, we get more people to sustain this this media project. And if $5 a month is, outside of your budget, totally understand because of how this economy is. Like, it sucks for everybody. $3 a month, can make you just like a supportive member, but you don't get access to bonus content. Um, or you can make like a sort of like one-time donation, but that's just uh, we're an LLC, so it's not tax deductible. So there's that. So just to let you guys know. But also like if you are listening to this on YouTube, a way to help us is if you become a subscriber to our YouTube channel, and if you click the bell icon, you can get notified of new episodes. So basically, like, uh, essentially, the more views, more subscribers that we get on YouTube, that helps like boost us in terms of visibility to get our stuff out there. So if you want to support us, you can either become a patron, or if you're on our YouTube channel, just become a subscriber and click the bell icon for notifications. So on that end for YouTube, you don't have to pay anything, but just the act of being a subscriber and viewing actually does help out in the long run. So if you want to support us, that's the best way to support us. Go on our website, realsankarahours.org, and you can find other ways to find us through other platforms. But yeah, that's it. Keep the faith.
All right. Stay dangerous.
All right, peace out, y'all.
Peace out.